few years when I did work with a couple people was through my blogs on the internet, which I was writing blogs before I actually put the book together. And they were receptive, or they wouldn't have gone through the trouble of looking me up. I worked with a couple of different investigators on very cold cases where they had almost no information, and that was kind of my training wheels, because I was just coming into really working on this and writing about my findings. So while they were receptive enough to contact me, then they went to the extreme of asking, extremely specific things. And my response to that was, gee, if you think we can read all of that, why didn't you come to us before? Why don't you employ astrologers routinely? Because the more information I could glean out of a horoscope, the more the investigator would come back and ask for. It put me to quite a challenge, and it really forced me to try and see just how far can we go. And I'm still trying to learn, how far can we go with this? How much can we discern from the horoscope? I mean, generally, it tells me everything I need to know.
Let's go to...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish.
I was going to say, taking into account that the astrology does describe physical characteristics, I'm now trying to figure out how far can I go in describing a possible suspect. So people have been receptive, although mixed with a healthy dose of skepticism, which is fine, because I certainly understand that this is really hard to believe, first of all.
Well, yes.
And you also have to be very good at what you're doing, or they will not come back. You have to give valuable information. So I welcome that as a challenge, working with investigators, and they've basically been very nice about it, very open-minded.
In the book Forensic by the Stars, as you walk through some of these cases, it makes sense, the progression you're going through. Well, let's talk about the Marilyn Monroe situation. We're running out of time in the program, but this is something that you said has been bothering you for a long time. Was it suicide? Was it a murder? The chapter in your book is called The Murder of Marilyn Monroe.
Yes.
A lot of great information in there, and you were just not comfortable with this. It was a suicide.
I never was, even as a child, because she, as I wrote in the book, she was quite popular in my family, and I just didn't buy it. This woman was at the peak of her career. She was really going places. She was probably the most famous woman in the world. In some ways, she still is. Everybody would recognize her photograph now.
Yes.
And I just couldn't believe it. It just seemed too pat. And there were investigations over the years that were reopened in Los Angeles, and never to anyone's real satisfaction. So when I took that one on, I read 3 or 4 books before I started working on it, because I just really wanted to know the whole background. The fun of this for me is not just doing the astrology. I love doing research, and I love reading biographies. So it requires me to put all that together when I'm doing a forensic horoscope. And it was a difficult chart to work on, because there were so many things going on. There were just so many things going on the night that she died, and so many individuals. There were many people in her house that night that we didn't really know about. So I pushed myself on that one, because I really wanted to know, and now I'm satisfied with my conclusion that it was murder.
Like I said, that starts off the chapter, and it goes back through some of the witnesses, and the witnesses' stories later were proven to be inaccurate, that type of thing. In fact, when you go back to the Lindbergh situation, I was shocked to find out that the senior Lindbergh basically ran the investigation. He was the one that was calling the shots.
He did, and it was just a weird thing that the New Jersey State Police had only been founded within a year of that crime. They were a fledgling group. The head of it happened to be the father of General Norman Schwarzkopf, who was famous for Desert Storm.
Right.
And his father was running the New Jersey State Police when it first opened. And in those days, we have to realize Charles Lindbergh was a god. He walked on water. People adored him. He was enormously popular. And they wanted to, I guess the state police was looking for approval or some sort of credibility and they thought they were doing a great service by putting him in control of the investigation, which was botched from start to finish. He told them, "Oh no, don't look for fingerprints on the windowsill." Well, they thought the kid went out the windowsill with the kidnapper, but he didn't want it fingerprinted. So it cast some suspicion on what was going on that night. I personally don't think the child was taken through the window after, studying up on that. But I definitely feel that people within the household were involved, definitely servants. I think it was the work of a gang. I really don't think Hauptmann had anything to do with it except being stuck with the silver certificates that were passed to him by another suspicious individual who died before he could be investigated.
The book is fascinating. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but we will have BD back on the program. She's working on a new book, Forensics by the Stars, Astrology Investigates. You lay all of this out, and it's interesting. In this book, you talk about TWA Flight 800 that crashed, the Pan Am crash, Boeing 747, back in July of 1996. Didn't make a lot of sense at the time. It's back in the news. You said you've never been comfortable with that, and you've investigated that, and that's in the book. And then, again, the Natalie Wood situation is in the new book you're writing, and that's been back in the news because that just didn't make a whole lot of sense, and that keeps resurfacing as well.
Right.
So there'll be a lot to talk about in the next program, a lot in this book, Forensic by the Stars, Astrology Investigates. BD, thank you so much for joining us on the program. We look forward to having you back. Excellent job in explaining this for everybody. And it really sort of like now when you look at it, it's sort of another tool in the toolbox for law enforcement now. And I'm glad they're paying some attention to it.
Oh, yes, that's one of my goals, to be able to spread the word about it so that it can be used by investigators. If they use psychics with some degree of success, then they can turn to astrologers as well.
Well, and the nice thing is, when you read the book, you get to B, but we find out how you got there. We find out what A is before you get to B, so it makes a logical sequence as we're studying that. The book is Forensics by the Stars. D Salerno has been our guest on This Week in America. The website is forensicbythestars.com. Thank you for joining us. Look forward to having you back in the program.
Thank you, Rick. It's been my pleasure.
You're listening to This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network.